All right, guys, it is 6:15 on Monday, the 27th of February. Wanted to call the meeting to order. Did everybody get a chance to look over the previous month's meeting? And if so, do I have a motion?
A motion.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? All right, Mr. Michael, you did your part there. Mr. Rob, what do we have on financials? Anything new?
This is the first month since we transferred the,
You can turn your microphone on.
I don't have
Oh,
Okay. So starting over, this is the first month that, since we've turned over the management of the account to the city, and I am learning a couple of things as a result. So I think Alyssa, in the future, what I'd like to do is the day you make it available is come by and talk to her, because I got a couple of questions. I'm looking at my notes from when Carl turned it over around the, and I don't know it well enough to answer any questions you may have, the rest of the board members, around the money that the $49,000 due to Villa Rica. Does anybody?
okay, that
It
was
was forgiven,
Yes.
wasn't it? That-
Well, no, it's still in our statement.
still pending. It
Yep.
was,
Thought council did
had to
vote
do
on that.
with Butterballs. I think it had to do with the roof repair.
The roof repair and butterballs, but
It's still
for some reason, I recall, well, at least I know it was discussed forgiving it, but
No, I had asked Sarah, our deputy city manager, to get a better explanation on that for finance, but I have not heard back from her. I'll ask
since
her
we had an
tomorrow.
equity interest in Butterballs and they tore it down, does the DDA now own that site because we have an equity interest in that? Or had an equity interest?
I mean, the city owns it, but from what I understand.
But what did they do with our investment?
Because it's, and that was the question I had, because it still shows as a liability, and I didn't have anything in my notes from Carl.
I can reach out again to Sarah tomorrow for her to check in
Okay.
on that, and when she gets an answer, let you all know, and I'll let her know what your question is.
Okay, that'd be great. The only other, and I'm just reconciling the notes I got from Carl back on December 13th. There was a note here around some bond paperwork and the census data. Does anybody have any information on how that connects to the DDA and why that may be a part of our treasurer's activity?
The bond would have been for,
Arbor Valley.
Arbor Valley, and we were going to get a fee for that,
We did,
but I don't know how it ties into census.
I don't either. There was a bond fee with, DDA, I could see it on the finances the last month or so.
I think I could find that bond and send it to you. It's about 600
Okay.
pages.
Oh, that's okay. You answered that question. And what I need to confirm, and I'll just send Carl an email, because he's right in the middle of his busy season, and follow up with him on what my note is here about census data and why that ties back to us, or does it? Since that's the only other question I had here. All the other numbers looked unchanged, and I'm assuming that means she got everything loaded, no issues?
Right.
Okay. Then, Andy, that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anyone else? All right, we'll move on down to item 4, old business. Any updates on the attorney or?
I guess I need to speak into the microphone as well. I did talk with the city manager a couple weeks ago, and he said that they have interviewed a couple attorneys, and they've got 2 more to go to make the decision on that. And as far as the second part, boards will remain the same. Some of you at that meeting, so I don't think we need to discuss that anymore. It'll stay like it is.
Okay.
Can I ask for a brief overview, because I was in Mexico during the meeting, and I know I was trying to contact you guys, but I know there was issues with the phones and everything.
Okay.
So even though I know everything's gonna stay the same, it was just like a unanimous decision, or?
I know the decision finally came to the mayor, the city manager, and the deputy city manager to leave them the same. After everyone spoke, all the board members who spoke, they made the decision to leave it the same, announce that at the end. Is that correct? I wasn't at the meeting, but,
Oh, okay.
At the meeting, it seemed more like the city withdrew the proposal.
Oh, okay.
That was the way I understood it too,
Yeah.
that they recognized there was another way to get after the issue
Okay.
they needed to resolve, other than go through the board restructuring.
all right.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. All right, moving on down, Mr. Chris, it's your turn.
All right. Good evening. I was asked to come and update the presentation that I provided you guys with late last year, I believe it was. Just kind of get you up to speed on where we currently are with regard to a number of projects going on in the city in the downtown or greater downtown area.
If y'all had rather come back here and look at it and see that, okay, just
Yes,
telling you that.
thank you.
Okay.
Just gonna give you guys
Yeah.
my back.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is add another TV on that wall right there. All right, so this is the Q1 first quarter 2023 project update. All right, first section we're gonna break these down into different subsections. One's gonna be about transportation projects. One's gonna be about development nodes. Another's gonna be about downtown specific projects. So the transportation projects are broken down into 3 different zones. Zone 1 is sort of the north, south, and west side of downtown Villa Rica. Zone 2 is around the north and east side of the downtown, and Zone 3, of course, is out there predominantly over the Mirror Lake area. Zone 1 is made up of primarily infill of sidewalks. We did an inventory back in 2019 of the existing sidewalk network and where the gaps were. And so as part of our transportation improvement program, we've done an analysis which breaks those segments down and determines what the cost value is on those projects, and then we'll figure out how we're going to pay for them at some other date. Zone 2, you do see the outline of the proposed tax allocation district in pink. That is currently not moving forward, but there may be an option possibly to work out something with the school board on that. So I don't think it's completely dead in the water, but it's pretty much near. That section, Zone 2, includes the upgrades to Anderson and Cleghorn, includes the Mirror Lake Connector, the Anderson to Old Stone Connector, the Pumpkintown upgrade, rebuild, and realignment, Old Stone Road upgrade, Elm Street, and North Avenue upgrades. Zone 3, if you look at the section that's in sort of the red trails on the right, there was actually new trail being proposed under the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program grant, which I'll go into it a little bit later. The blue section towards the middle is the existing Mirror Lake Loop. And then up to the north and a little bit to the west, there's kind of an orangey color. That's a new bike ped path trail system on Stockmar, Dallas Highway, and Pumpkintown Road. So that's part of our what we call our comprehensive transportation improvement plan. All right, so Zone 1, we're looking at $1.9 million worth of projects. That's all sidewalks. There are a couple of different options that we're exploring with respect to, I think there's a grant called a CTIP, which is it's a Transportation Alternatives Program, CTAP. That will look at non-roadway transportation improvements like sidewalks, bike paths, etc. We're in the early stages of, we just actually got to the point now where we've done a cost analysis and put all this stuff together. We're going to present this to GDOT in the coming months. Zone 2 is the big one, $93 million.
Can I ask a quick question on Zone 1?
Yep.
On the downtown railroad pedestrian improvements, is that based on what GDOT already came in with the presentation that the city provided at one point?
That is based on the railroad crossing elimination grant that I put together late last year that has the sidewalks on, oh, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's actually later in the
Okay.
presentation. Okay, so $93 million, $94 million, but that includes the $38 million north bypass. So we have applied for grants for a number of these projects. More specifically, we had a grant last year called the RAISE grant for the Mirror Lake Connector, Phase 1B, which goes from Cleghorn Street to Shoreline Parkway. We did get a grant from the state, which is part of the Rural Downtown Redevelopment Grant for Phase 1A, which goes from Cleghorn to North Carroll. And we have applied for a RAISE grant 2023 for segment 7 and 4, which is the complete rebuild of the road with the realignment. 1B also was not selected for the RAISE grant. We actually came in, this was actually very exciting for Loss. We were one of 156 applications that were selected as finalists. There were 13 from the state of Georgia. They were separated into urban and rural projects. There was one rural and one urban project that were picked. We were under urban. The MARTA 5-point Station 1, we were in second place out of a national competition. That's pretty darn good. So we were, it was suggested to us that we revise our application and improve upon the sections that we did not score well in. But because of the time constraint in Fuqua moving forward with the second segment of the Mirror Lake Connector, we didn't have time to wait until September of this year to decide whether or not we got funded for the project. It just had to move forward. So we switched it over to Punkintown, which we already had engineered. So we're looking at a $18 million project on Punkintown that we're applying for a $15 million grant for. So fingers crossed that goes out tomorrow. And lastly, the $6.6 million projects for the Mirror Lake trail system. As I mentioned, we had applied for a $3 million GOSP grant, which we were told last week that we did not make the initial cut. So I've got a debriefing with them next month to find out, because I thought it was really an outstanding project. It met all the evaluation criteria, and I'm not really sure why it didn't score better, but want to find out if we need to reapply or look at some other different funding source for this project. The areas of the blue there, as I mentioned, an existing trail. That's 30-year-old bike ped trail, and it's in really rough shape. So it all needs to be resurfaced. The red section was the GOSP addition, which would have linked the Mirror Lake Elementary with the Connors Road Park and the Pine Mountain Gold Museum, and eventually over to Stockmar Dallas Highway to the library. So that really made a lot of sense. We've got to find some other way to fund that project, because it's a really good one. There's a lot of money out there for trails right now. Let's switch over to development nodes. Obviously with these new roadway projects, it opens up some new opportunities for future development. We're going to see a lot more of that with the north bypass opening up, because that's really going to open up a lot of land north of the city where there's still some very large undeveloped tracts around the Harrell and McCurdy areas. But more specifically, let's look at what's kind of going on in the in-town area. So this map shows downtown. You got nodes 1 through 5, I think. No, 6. Okay, there were 6 in the corner there. And so what that is Wood PEC, number 1. You got Arbors at Villarica. I think I got the name right. Number 2. Fuqua, number 3. Inline, number 4. 5, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll get to it. 6, of course, being the Walton Phase 2. So, Gordon Street East, this is behind the Olive Tree Restaurant, and to the east, basically between Cleghorn and the Avanti Building. What their proposal there is 300 multifamily units. I don't know that they've gone beyond much more of a concept phase on this, so I think it's still in sort of a pre-engineering phase or a conceptual phase. I'm not really sure in this current economy what's moving forward on this project. But number 2, of course, Arbors at Villa Rica is fully under construction. I'm sure you can see that from Mirror Lake Parkway over the graded land. That project probably will be done in the summer of this year. They're really moving fast on it. I think they're probably down to their last building start. So if you get a chance, drive down Cleghorn to Anderson. It's a really spectacular thing to see in the middle of this rather desolate, neglected neighborhood. So Fuqua, you can see they're moving a lot of dirt out there, and with the Arbors project, you've got the Mirror Lake Connector going through right to the south of the apartment complex, then cutting through Fuqua's development. As I mentioned with the raise grant that we did not get, I failed to mention that we actually reapplied the same project to a smaller grant called the Reconnecting Communities Pilot. That one still has a chance to be funded in short order, and it's possible that we may get that second half of Fuqua's project paid for through that grant. That should be announced probably in the spring. Fuqua says they want that commercial space open in 16 months, and that was 4 months ago. So, that's going to be done by the summer of next year. As far as the residential goes, I will give you a little briefing on residential development, which I did not actually have in my slides, but I did do a recent analysis on that. I want to share some information on that a little bit later. Inline communities, this is another one that the map actually should be shifted counterclockwise because the roadway goes from Anderson up to Old Stone Road. This project is still in the design engineering phase. It actually has been approved for zoning. So I think the developer is trying to figure out who the subcontractors are going to be for the various nodes of development. It's a combination of single-family detached, townhouses, and multifamily. And they're all, I believe, age-restricted. So that project will move forward.
I heard rumor that because of the school board's hesitation on a TAD, the age restricted may come off because that's been delayed so long that they may not be able to do that anymore.
Well, I think that's not really bad because it gives the developer a little more flexibility in who they choose as far as what the product client is going to be. It'll be a more broad appeal for a single-family detached and non-age restricted. The TAD would have given us a little more flexibility and zoning control to ensure that the impact on the school system was minimized. But since they kind of tied our hands on that, there's really not a whole lot we can do beyond that. And again, I'll speak to the housing situation in the city at the end of my presentation. 61 at Pumpkintown. HRC is the engineering firm. This is still going through a conceptual design phase. It was a smaller townhouse development, but they were able to acquire land towards the back where they now also included a retention pond. But they will include 112 townhouse units, 40,000 square feet of commercial space, retail, and 2 commercial out parcels. So this really sort of changes the dynamic of the new Punkintown connector and whatever that's going to end up being as far as like a residential support node. Legacy at Walton Trail. This is phase 2 of the existing housing tax credit development. Phase 1 was 90 units of senior and income restricted housing of multifamily. Phase 2 is going to be income restricted, not senior, but will also include family units. Predominantly 2-bedroom, 2 and a few 3 bedrooms. So we're not talking about a public housing development. It's not talking about a large family type of housing congregate. It's really more like a onesie, twosie, or probably like a 1 or 2 bedroom multifamily. Because phase 2 is only a 4% tax credit, there were much fewer restrictions on the income limits that the developer has to, or the Walton Communities has to adhere to. I believe there's typically like a 10 or 15 year period where they have to keep a certain number of units under market value based on income. A lot of those units really appeal to people that are on more fixed incomes, like people on disability or people that are on Social Security. And those at a 4% tax credit, really you're only looking at like an 80%, 60 to 80% area median income. And given the cost of housing nowadays, you know, you might get rents there that are from $900 to $1,200. So it's not really, you know, public housing by any means. Switching now to downtown projects, being the Downtown Development Authority. I thought you might enjoy this part. All right, so of course, existing conditions. We've got a lot going on downtown. It's a blank canvas, not a pretty one, but you know, it is what it is. You know, it reminds me of downtown Ackworth 25 years ago. Before they started their LCI program, same thing. They have state routes on both sides. They got a railroad that bifurcates the downtown. They got structures on both sides. But where I see us being different is that we're starting off at such a stronger economic position than they did. Ackworth downtown in, say, 2000, maybe had 2 restaurants downtown, maybe had a couple of shops that stayed open during the week. And look what we've got. I mean, wow. We've lost a few here and there, but you know, we're from a very strong position with respect to our economy and what we're about to invest in our downtown infrastructure. So right now, you know, we finished the LCI study, and one of the important things about LCI is really identifying the look and the character, the feel, and the cohesion of downtown. And these pictures on the top of the screen there I actually took a few weeks ago when I was in Birmingham. And they're really elements that show how to use texture, landscaping, public art, even just kind of like sporadic things like the bicycle stuck to the wall with a bunch of vines on it, just to kind of give that rustic, edgy element. Or the lady who's sitting on the bench there with the sort of a tile mosaic dress on. So we did the LCI in 2020, 2021. We've got the North Side Downtown Streetscape Project that was awarded an award from a grant from the ARC. We're just now wrapping up the Downtown Place Making and Alleyway Activation Program through the Georgia Conservancy, which is a project we also did with the Atlantic Regional Commission. That will be wrapping up on the 14th at the council meeting. Because of that led us into being accepted into the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative, which is an organization of cities throughout the state that have really made progress in creating that unique space in their downtown areas. So you'd have something like City of Monroe or some Covington, so they had like maybe 4 cities each year, and we were one of those 4 because of our connection with Georgia Conservancy. Georgia Conservancy is actually going to again be our partner in the program, along with the Department of Community Affairs. We will start that project in late March. Is our first step. That's a 2-year project, and it gives you access to a small implementation grant, and then once you graduate, an even larger implementation grant. But it really gives you more clarity and definition. It takes LCI and takes the placemaking to the next step, and really defining what those projects are. I'll get into that in just a second. So the downtown placemaking alleyway activation program we're currently doing looks at our existing public spaces and how they could be modified or adapted or completely reimagined. The visual on the bottom right there is just sort of a reutilization using landscaping, public art, and paver materials to really develop a more aesthetically pleasing, view of the back service alley. It's a great idea. The back alley there is all privately owned, which does make it a bit of a challenge, in which case we would have to do some sort of partnership arrangement with easements with each of the property owners. But just kind of visioning and just saying there are things we could do to make our kind of not so attractive spaces look a little bit more engaging. This is another area over on Temple Street, just past the lofts, looking back towards Los Cowboys. And on the right is the Prospectors Park. That is a really underutilized park, except as Elisa would point out that it's very active as a unofficial dog park for the lofts across the street.
Yeah.
So this shows on the right sort of a really highly elevated version of what the space could look like, as far as really interjecting layered space and a little more definition into the space. We've got sort of a very low impact, very economical version of this, and this of course is the more high end. So this is just kind of giving people some ideas, and when they finish the project they're also going to give us some idea what that would actually cost. So then we'd be able to decide how to go about prioritizing that and how to pay for it, if that's what we want to put there. The back alley. Oh, this is Church Street.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty.
This makes my heart happy, like just to see things like this hopefully happen.
Well, what we're looking for here is to develop a defined streetscape system that actually invites the business owners to utilize the bottom floor of the backside of those buildings.
Yep.
It creates two spaces. So, if we don't have outdoor dining in the front, maybe we got it on the back.
I know. I was always wanted a courtyard back there, so I could allow that.
Ackworth did that on the main drag next to the railroad tracks there. The back alley is now open, and the restaurants have outdoor dining back there. So really
Hapeville
nice.
did that as well. They had a service alley that once they came in and did the treatments of the alley, put in the pavers, put in the decorative lighting, the business has opened up dual frontages. I mean, it's a great opportunity.
That's awesome.
So I mentioned the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative. That's a project that's a program that's offered through the Georgia Cities Foundation, which is part of the Georgia Municipal Association. And again, it's a select group of cities that are recruited or selected to participate. So this is a real honor for us that they think that because of our efforts with LCI and our placemaking efforts, that we are a good candidate for their program. So we'll be able to network with all these other cities and see examples of what they did, how they did it, what sort of process they went through, and really kind of learn and develop what it is that we want our city to look like. I always say, and I think I mentioned this a couple of slides ago, let me see, cool downtowns don't happen accidentally. I mean, that's such an understatement, that all these cities that I've been to that have such unique spaces, like whether it's downtown Woodstock or Covington, that just, you're like, wow, it's like sort of an area in the park where they have a circle of hammocks. Why not? Yeah. It's just things that we can offer to attract a variety of interested people downtown. Downtown's going to be the center place or the centerpiece for all the roadway connections coming into the city, all the trail systems coming into the city. It's going to be the place. It's got to be the place. So looking at the downtown LCI study, which included Fullerville as well, and also I wanted to expand the boundaries to include about 75% of the city's Golden Nugget Trail system. The Atlanta Regional Commission is big on trails. So I wanted to make sure I could get as much of that in there as possible. You know, that's a long-term legacy project, and we're actually have been much more aggressive about it with the GOSP grant for Mirror Lake, also to include, you know, new trails along Stockmar, Dallas Highway, Punkintown, but also the Mirror Lake Connector will be a fully integrated, complete street with, you know, the bike ped path on one side and the golf cart path on the other side. Be interested to see how many golf carts can get back up the hill to downtown, but maybe the gas ones can.
Quick question. Explain to me when you're talking about trails,
Okay.
because I understand sidewalks, I understand streets, I understand alley spaces, but I mean, are we just talking about a dirt path, or what are we talking about here? Something that's landscape, not landscape?
Yeah, this is kind of like the Greenbelt in Carrollton.
Okay.
So it's going to be probably a 8 to 10 foot concrete or hard surface path.
I just wasn't sure, so that's why I was.
Yeah, it actually kind of varies, because when we look at the impact of a hard surface trail going through the Connors Road Park and Nature Preserve, is that really a better alternative than having something that's a little more natural scape? So it's still up for debate. But this really focuses on the character areas and, you know, looking at the roadway connections and the LCI, as I mentioned earlier, that we finished in 2021, does come with the possibility of obtaining federal funding at an 80% to 20% match ratio, which is a really outstanding value for the residents. The railroad crossing elimination grant. So pedestrian and railroad upgrades, we talked about this really briefly. Didn't want to get ahead of myself, but you see sort of the conceptual designs that I did sort of in a scaled model of showing how we can integrate the green space and create or enhance that pedestrian environment to make downtown a lot more safe. This grant I wrote back in November. It's roughly $800,000. We do have the endorsement of one of our congressmen on this grant. I think it was Drew Ferguson, and of course both state reps are on this. And we also have the blessing of Norfolk Southern, believe it or not. In meeting with them, their perspective is anything you can do to keep people off the tracks, we're all for. So the fact that we're fencing it in and really kind of narrowing the ingress egress points for pedestrians really makes them happy. So I'm hoping this will. I mean, it's not a huge grant, $800,000, but I think it will have a great impact in the ability to access both sides of downtown, which is currently very problematic.
Question. I know you may not have the answer to this, but being that it'll be closed off and safer for people to use, and right now being that this is an entertainment district, will it be able to be dual with that enclosed, or it still may just stay on one side?
Well, the entertainment district's only on the north side.
Right.
So if they wanted to expand that to the south side, they would have to expand the district boundaries.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
all
So it is a possibility with
Oh,
it
yeah.
being enclosed like that
Oh,
now?
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is a really exciting and terrifying project right here. This is going to fundamentally change the appearance and the flow and function of downtown Villa Rica forever. You know, eliminating the upper portion of Main Street and reintegrating Main and Temple, creating Temple as a true two-lane road, slowing down traffic, having better eyes on the businesses. I think really enhance business down there. Adding in landscaping, lighting, cooling down the area. Because if you walk down there in the summertime, it's hot. Also, Marisol, you'll like this, addressing the stormwater issues.
Yes.
So we looked at the city of Woodstock as a very similar situation where the roads up here and the sidewalks are down here. And what they've done is they've really done a good job of terracing those areas where you have like a parking zone, a pedestrian landscape zone, retaining wall, and then larger sidewalk. So we want to expand the sidewalks out. So there are opportunities for outdoor dining, not large, but you might go from an 8-foot sidewalk to a 12-foot sidewalk, But having that retaining wall, you could still have, 2 tops and 4 tops up against the wall. It'd be quite easy to navigate. Having that green space in the middle, though, is really going to be exceptional. And what we showed here originally in the blue was some sort of a shade feature with a water feature. I'm not a big fan of kids in a water feature that close to a railroad. I don't think that's a very good idea. I'd like to see a farmers market pavilion there instead that we could use for a variety of different events, whether that was a small music venue, a craft venue, farmers market, all sorts of ideas that might be. Over there in the corner, you've got the statue place of the gold of the location for the gold miner statue. That's in a little triangle area with the trees. So this, as I mentioned, this project was funded by the Atlanta Regional Commission for the planning and engineering. We put the RFQ out right before Christmas. Got the results in. We are making a recommendation to the city council at the next meeting on who to go with, and that project will probably take about 16 to 18 months to finish. And it's a $1.4 million project. I mean, this is just the engineering. This is going to be a $16 to $18 million project when we're done. Time-wise, I hope to see this done by the time I retire. I'm 54, so it's not too much longer. But so 11 years, I think we can get that done. But it's like I said, it's going to be 18 months to get the engineering done. That we apply for the construction funds probably in 2024. Yes, it's going to be the fall of next year, and then they'll do the announcements for funding in the spring of 25, and we'll get started on it in the summer of 25. And it's going to take roughly 18 months, easily. Now the scary part is that this is huge. This is extremely transformative, and we're going to have to work with our business owners to make sure that access is maintained, to make sure that it's safe, to address issues like parking, and just the general disruption and the anxiety it's going to cause. So let everyone know ahead of time. It's a little pain for a long-term gain.
I think this becomes a lot more viable once the bypass is operational because you'll reduce the number of trucks. Not all of them, but you'll
Sure.
reduce a lot of the trucks.
Yeah. If we could only reduce the number of trains. All right, so that's just a more close version of how that space then functions with the Temple to Main conversion. So let's talk about funding real quick. So we've gotten over, let me just say, I've gotten us over $3 million. as a planner, I'm used to sharing everything I do. I've gotten to over $3 million of grants in the last 12 months. We still have $21 million pending. We did not get the $3 million for the GOSP program, but I am reaching out not only to the DNR, but also to the Atlanta Regional Commission to find out what we could do, because I don't want to give up on that project. I think it's a really, really exceptional project. And I don't necessarily think we do enough in Douglas County because it's a lot newer. And so we spend a lot more on infrastructure and then so on and so forth. And even the fact that Mirror Lake is a homeowners association and they kind of take care of themselves for the most part. So I'd like to make sure we just reaffirm our commitment to our Douglas County residents as well. But outstanding, we've got the railroad crossing elimination grant for the downtown pedestrian improvements. We've got the raise grant for Puckton Road, $15 million on that one. That's a biggie. The Reconnecting Communities pilot, which is for phase 1B of Mirror Lake Connector, which is still pending. That's a $5.1 million project, which would be a handsome sum that the city would not have to reimburse Fuqua for. And of course, more recently, I've applied for an additional LCI for the Highway 61 corridor. Now, the reason I did that was with the bypass opening up, it's going to really change fundamentally how that whole system is used. I mean, all that traffic that was used to going downtown is now going down Industrial Boulevard. And when you've got that choke point right there with the railroad, and another choke point with the Highway 78, another one with 20, another one with South Carroll, and then all the way down the line. And then once you get to the bottom of the city, what the heck do you do? So we want to look at land use. We want to look at safety improvements. We want to look at pedestrian infrastructure. We want to look at aesthetics. You know, obviously from South Carroll down to 78 is kind of a, could be better. It's a pretty wide expanse of nothing. The park and ride lots down there are vastly in need of improvement. That's about the nicest thing I could say. And we also want to consider doing what's called a community improvement district, or a CID, where the local business owners pay a small extra percentage of tax that they pool and they work and they get to do their own projects and not what the city wants to do. So the last thing I want to touch on was housing.
Hey, Chris,
Yes, sir.
could you go back one slide
I sure can.
before we go into the housing? That railroad crossing elimination grant, which shows pending here, that's actually approved, right?
No, that one's it's been submitted, but they have not made the announcements on it yet.
Okay. I thought that was the one that the work had to be done like within 18 months or something.
No, that's the rural downtown redevelopment grant for North Carroll to Clayhorn Street.
Okay,
So that's the first leg of the Mirror Lake Connector.
okay.
So that one's good. Gotta get done. Yeah.
So when do we expect a decision on the railroad crossing?
I suspect it'll be any time now in the spring this year.
Okay.
It could be as early as next week.
And is that with the Department of Transportation?
Mm-hmm.
Is that one we need Ferguson support?
Yeah, in fact, the three big ones there: Reconnecting Communities Pilot, Raise Grant, and Railroad Crossing. All three are U.S. DOT.
Okay.
And so I've done, especially with the last Raise Grant, really done more of an aggressive effort to get our congressmen and our senators on board to support our project, because I think it gives it a little more credibility.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something I've slowly learned, from the railroad. But now I've got, in fact, the reason I'm submitting this grant tomorrow instead of last Friday was because I just got John Ossoff's sign off on it.
Okay.
So I've got Ossoff, Warnock, and Ferguson. So it's give it a little extra
Okay.
punch.
Thank you.
Okay, housing is not a good thing. It's a great thing, but it's not a good thing. We've got roughly 5,000 new housing units that are approved for permitting, but developers aren't going forward. they're not giving up. They're just saying we're going to watch and see what happens to the economy, because we really got caught with our pants down back in 2008, and they got stuck with a lot of inventory. I'm seeing a lot of dirt moving. I'm seeing a lot of infrastructure. I'm seeing a lot of stub outs. I'm just not seeing a lot of vertical construction. Looking at probably the two neighborhoods that are basically are ready for stick-built homes. One's over in Mirror Lake, which is might help me out with this. Is the back part of
Back part of the Mirror Lake Dam Road.
backs up
They've
the road.
I don't remember
South
I don't
Harbor.
remember what node that is.
South Harbor. So South Harbor has roughly, we'll say 60 lots that are available for building. They've built 6 houses, and they're not building anymore for right now. One that they built is now the sales office. 2 of the ones they've built have been purchased, and they've got, say, 3 others that are available. The only other development that the infrastructure's in is what's the one? It's right off of Tolbert Road, Twin Oaks Phase 2. That one, the infrastructure's all in. The roads are paved. They've got one house built that's a sales office. They've got 2 other houses that are built that are purchased, and then I think they have 2 under construction. This is citywide. I'm looking at the development of Hickory Level infrastructure, looking at Connors Landing infrastructure, looking at Fuqua moving dirt, looking at the one behind the fire station, moving dirt infrastructure. No one's building. We are right now on the precipice of the spring real estate market with nothing to offer. There are 34 homes for sale in the city out of 3,000 houses, or 6,000 houses, pardon. That is barely over half of 1%. So we're kind of in a holding pattern. I don't expect we're going to see this big, massive flight from the housing market. I don't think we're going to see a housing crash. I think developers are being extremely conservative. Interest rates are really kind of keeping the price points in check. They went down to around 6. Now they're back up to around 7 now. The quantitative tightening that the Fed has been doing over the last several months looks like it will continue. We thought we were going to kind of have a soft landing, but it's more likely that we'll end up I think we've been in a recession for quite a while, but, especially the economic indicators of what we're seeing out there with housing is showing us that. But I expect we're going to start to see things pick up in the summertime. Obviously, January, February are not great time for construction, with the rain. So things may start picking up later on, definitely by the 3rd quarter of this year, but we're nowhere near what we've seen historically, pre-COVID and post-COVID as far as new housing starts, which leads me to say that we've got 5,000 housing units, and we expect those are going to be done in the next 2 years. We're going to be swamped next year, absolutely swamped. And we're going to see our population go from the current roughly 18,000 people, I think we're 18,300 at this point, over 30,000. So when we look at our investments in infrastructure, transportation, quality of life, homes, trails, access, downtown, I mean, we are set up for such success. I mean, it's great to be in this position. So that's about the summary of Q1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Any more questions for Chris?
No, I just want to compliment the ideas. Everything's looking great.
Oh, I can certainly send you this presentation tomorrow, because I'm gonna send it to Ellen, who was unable to be here, so I'll send that to you by
Please.
email.
Thank you.
To
Thank
give you
you.
more,
Thank you,
more time
Chris.
to absorb it.
Yes.
Anything else for Chris?
No.
All right, we'll move on down to public comment. We do have a guest.
No comments.
Perfect. I've got one for myself. I know my term is coming up due next month, and I am not going to choose to renew for DDA. I know. I don't have the time to invest in this like I need to, like I want to. I've got a lot going on with the business, and I've got to put that as my first priority. So,
Y'all no longer live in Villa Rica, right?
not personally, yes, correct, but the business will stay. So, yeah,
Well, we have to
absolutely.
hear that.
Yeah. So, I will stay on if needed up to 3 months, or if we don't need to have another person here, we've got the numbers, then I'm fine to go ahead and step down when my term truly ends. So, whatever that
We
decision.
told Carl he had to find a replacement.
I've got a few people I'm going to talk to, so. So, just knowing that, and of course, we'll have to nominate another chairman as well, so. All right, that's all I've got. Any other comments? If not, I'll make a, or not make a motion, ask for a motion.
Move to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Adjourned.
See you.
Yep.
I voted too. Turn.
So you got a little extra on that.
Thank y'all for coming. Appreciate it.
Oh, good.
That's not what I was expecting to hear.
I don't want to just sit here and not be able to contribute.